SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday Eve.
All right, Karine Jean-Pierre, man, little split with the Democratic Party. I think she's looking for a book deal, is what that's all about.
Oh, she already wrote it.
Oh, okay.
She's promoting it now.
Ah, all right.
It's like
right.
Jake Tapper and what's-his-face. They decided, now I can tell half-truths instead of bald-faced lies.
Oh, my gosh. Well, there's trouble in Democratic paradise. Many in the Democratic Party are speaking out. They're condemning KJP, and she, of course, now labels herself as an independent, is what she says. Meanwhile, the president, he's been talking to Xi Jinping of China. Still tensions between the two nations over this trade situation. They spoke this morning, first time since the president took office. That, according to Chinese state media, 2 hours, it's being reported, they talked. But not really a breakthrough. The president says he's a tough cookie to negotiate with, standing firm. I don't think we should be. He wrote this yesterday, actually. He said, very tough and extremely hard to make a deal with, in all caps. That's what the president wrote on social media yesterday. So it's no surprise in my view that it doesn't appear we're really close to calling a truce in this rather fragile trade situation. Markets are, I think normally you would see the markets, certainly based on the way they've reacted since Liberation Day. What was that, April 7th, I believe, when you saw these wild swings in the markets just based on a little bit of news. The old trade on, tariff off situation. I would have thought when the president announced he was having this phone call with the Chinese top leader that we'd see markets react positively, like 1,000 points, thinking, hey, wait, there's a breakthrough. But they did not react that way. And now we see why, because after the call, the president didn't really have much to report other than he's very tough, extremely hard to make a deal with. Not surprising. Speaking of economic issues as it pertains to this country and China, there's no question that this artificial intelligence revolution is, to a great extent, boosting our economy and really holds the greatest promise and prospect for future economic growth. So I read some information this morning. There are 5,300 data centers in the United States, 400 in China. They're a laggard in this area. I see this as good news, honestly, because if you're going to win the artificial intelligence and quantum computing war, if you will, you got to have data centers to power it, and they're lagging in that category, which I thought was good news. The other
But they
thing
are ahead of us in a category that is of vital importance to any country's growth in the number of data centers, and that is growth in energy production.
Totally true there, and that is
They're building power plants every day of the week.
That's right, and I view that as I've said it before. That's the new currency in economic development is power. Good news is that we're relaxing the regulations here, especially on liquid natural gas. So you've seen some reports the last couple of days of announcements of new projects to extract and transport liquid natural gas. That happens to be an energy source that we are in particular rich in, like a lot of it beneath our feet. Of course, the green wackos have been condemning LNG. Of course, nothing suits them. They want everybody to die.
It goes
right?
back to what we've always said about the environmental activists, that they don't really give a rat's rear end about Mother Earth. They just care about commie power.
That's so true.
Because for the longest time, they were all in for natural gas. Look how clean it is. And then they figured out, oh, wait, America's got a whole bunch of that. Well, that won't really help shift the power dynamic if we're in favor of that, so we have to be against it. And all of a sudden, overnight, light natural gas is bad.
Well, but didn't I catch something perhaps of late that the Sierra Club now has put their blessing on LNG? They seem to be okay with it. I think they pivoted on that. The Sierra Club, now, as you well know, the green activists extend way beyond just the Sierra Club. There are lots of other crazy people out there. But I think that they have softened their stance on it somewhat. And, you know, what made me think about this is, since we're talking about liquid natural gas, is this conversation that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson had directly with Joe Biden about an order he allegedly signed, ostensibly signed, banning the export. You remember this, of export of natural gas to Russia. And remember what he told Mike Johnson. Well, I didn't do that. Yes, sir, it's right here on the document, on the order itself. So now we've got James Comer in the U.S. House, and now the president as well has weighed in, and they're ordering further investigation into this auto pen stuff. I mean, when you got Joe Biden telling the Speaker of the House, no, I didn't do that. Now, in his case, it could just be...
Well, the man lies like he's breathing.
Well,
so.
yeah. I mean, he could have literally signed it with his own fingers and said, no, I didn't do that. So it's suspicious at best, but it certainly warrants further investigation. I don't have a problem with auto pen in the interest of efficiency, but I started thinking about that. Shouldn't we do something to, like, capture even the auto pen when it's signing these executive orders? I mean, should there be some sort of sophisticated video recording of it, including people that are, like, present watching? Maybe
I'm fairly certain there is a process involving witnesses and those that are in certain positions that have to either witness or sign off on.
Well, hell, yeah, there's lots
I think part of the problem is that those measures were circumvented because they knew Joe Biden would just go out there and say whatever they told him to say or put on the flashcard or the teleprompter, and he just keeps claiming he signed all this stuff. But there seems to be not a single – well, I take that back. There may be one that he actually signed, and that would have been the thing he kept saying he wasn't going to sign, the pardon for his crackhead son.
I totally agree. That's so upside down. But I started thinking about even we average citizens, there are situations where you have to sign something that's witnessed by a notary and stamped, embossed, right, on the document by a notary. I mean, that's pretty common for lots of different documents. But shouldn't we hold that minimum same standard to the President of the United States when they're signing executive orders? I mean, I believe that in the interest of transparency, every person in this country ought to be able to go out and view the video recording of every order sign. We got technology to do that, to make that easy. And the president, in my view, should be present. Even though it's maybe not his fingers holding the pen, it's a machine doing it. Shouldn't they be present?
I don't even know if I'm fully on board with the auto pen even being an option. If you don't have a president who's physically capable of signing their name, and if you're trying to push through so much crap that it is physically straining to sign their name that many times, then maybe you should slow down the freaking process.
I'm not arguing with you about that, and it's not that many, right? I mean, a couple hundred or so in a 4-year period of time. You seem like you'd be able to sign that. Heck, just in normal business, it feels like in my career I've signed that many. I remember having signing sessions on, like, the acquisition of a company. You better be prepared to sit down for 2 hours and sign documents. It makes signing a mortgage look like you're just signing your name on a single letter. I mean, it's amazing. That's just part of it. But I'm with you. But I'm always a person that's thinking about, if we could make something more efficient by automating, I'm for it, but it's got to be secure.
But how is it more efficient if you got to bring out the machine and get all the people that are supposed to be there in position?
I hear you.
When you could just sit it in front of them and he scribble,
I agree.
and it's done.
We got Roy Turner, Executive Director of the Elvis Presley Birthplace, and then newly elected Mayor John Horhn.
Hey, this is Bob. Just walking.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Middays with Gerard Gibert
Let's do this.
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Let's go.
There's just an empty space. There's nothing left here to remind me. Just the memory of your face. Oh, take a look at me now. There's just an empty space. And you coming back to me is against the
From the movie,
and that's what I've got to face.
The Goodbye Girl. That was a good movie, actually.
I wish I could just make
Phil Collins there. That's when he was in his prime for sure. So,
What was the dude in that movie with the, Jay Leno chin? Very distinctive face, and you can never remember his name. Played
in The Goodbye
Mike
Girl?
or Mark or whatever it was.
Oh, that was like The Friend or something,
Yeah.
was it? Yeah.
He's just one of those actors that's got a face that when you see him in a movie, like, I know that guy, but
Yeah.
you can never remember his name.
Okay. Richard Dreyfuss. Is that what you're talking about?
No,
'Cause
that was the main dude.
Yeah, he was the main, right.
I think his name was Mark or Mike or something like that.
I got Marsha Mason, of course. She was Paula. I don't know. Paul Benedict.
There you
That's
go.
who it is. Paul Benedict. You're right. It has the kind of pointy chin. Right, was the friend there. That was a good movie, though. The Goodbye Girl. 1977. Wow. Written by Neil Simon. Dreyfuss, he's kind of out there, isn't he? But he was a heck of an actor in his day. Who could ever forget him from Jaws, Tootsie? He was really good. Jaws, 1975. Good stuff. So, more about this data center explosion in this country, that a data point that really surprised me. It now accounts for 1% of our GDP. Just the data center industry. Not the IT industry, the data center industry. Just for comparative purposes, healthcare, the largest overall industry. Now that encompasses a lot. 6% GDP. 1% of GDP is now attributed to the data center industry. So, of course, you guys are aware of the big AWS investment in the state of Mississippi, specifically in Madison County, announced at $10 billion, as a $10 billion investment. Just yesterday, the company announced they plan to spend $10 billion on new data centers in North Carolina to, again, expand their artificial intelligence infrastructure. $100 billion this year is what Amazon intends to spend on capital expenditures. $100 billion. with most of that going to AI-related projects. Now, this is, again, what the Chuck Schumers and the Democrats and even Joe Biden just freaked out about all the time. They didn't pay any income taxes because they spent $100 billion freaking dollars, and they were able to expense that at the rate of 50% of that, $50 billion. They could write off in the year of purchase, assuming that all of that's capital expenditures subject to the Section 179 immediate expensing. Well, the company didn't make but $20 billion.
Got some folks on the text line saying the movie was against all odds.
Oh, okay, pardon me. The Goodbye Girl is another one that I think starred Richard Dreyfuss. That's the one I was thinking about. 1977. So, against all odds? Yeah, that was a 1984 film. That's not what that song's from, though. I don't think.
I think it is, because the name of the song is Against All Odds.
I know that's the name of the song,
and
but
apparently it was written for the soundtrack.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'm confused. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. It's a long time ago. I don't know why I thought it was from that movie. Because there's a video for the song. No, you know what I'm thinking about? The song was The Goodbye Girl. That was they feature footage from clips from the movie. And the Goodbye Girl, wasn't David Gates? It may have been David Gates for Bread, because it's a real high-pitch sort of vocal song. Is that right? Yeah, the Goodbye Girl song. I'm looking it up now. I'm curious. Thank you. Yeah, it's David Gates. I had that right. I got one thing right. Pardon me. Sorry, you're right. Against all odds. So I got the two confused. I don't know if I'd say similar storylines, but they're both kind of romantic movies. But one was 77, one was 84. We ought to crank up the Goodbye Girl here in a minute. That's so we can get all that right. David Gates, of course, the lead singer of Bread. I do remember that. Saw him at the Coliseum here in Jackson, 1971 or 2 or something like that. So the data center industry, that's just shocking to me. So I see Bill and Perkston, Mike from Mileage. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Pardon me. Long time ago. I don't know why I thought that. The song's kind of has the same sort of tempo as well. This data center industry at 1%, and this $10 billion, and again, this $10 billion they've announced, you sort of got a wink, $10 billion. Yeah, really, $10 billion. 500 jobs is what they're predicting will be created on these data centers in North Carolina. But $100 billion this year, that is massive. And this is something that the president's been touting, as well as the massive amount of investments, capital investments being made in the country, but a lot of those do involve major technology investments. Here's my take on the One Big Beautiful Bill. You got Elon Musk is really railing now against the Senate Republicans. Don't pass this thing. It's terrible. He's really going crazy and calling him out in public, so to speak. You've seen this. He's gone to social media. He called the One Big Beautiful Bill, quote, a disgusting abomination. Shame GOP lawmakers who support it. But then he sort of doubled down on that. He's now on social media saying, kill the bill. He's mad that the bill does not protect the EV tax credits. You see the tangled web being weaved here, because he, of course, is the CEO of Tesla, who sells EVs, who benefits greatly from these tax credits, which were pumped up quite a bit in the totally misnamed Inflation Reduction Act passed under Joe Biden. Musk says, call your senator, call your congressman. Bankrupting America is not okay. That's what he said. Now, I agree with him. I'd like to see some additional spending cuts and reforms in the One Big Beautiful Bill. when the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was asked about Musk's opposition to the legislation which passed his chamber, he said, Elon's a good friend. This is just today, by the way. We texted late last night. We're going to talk this morning. I just want to make sure that he understands what I think everybody on Capitol Hill understands. This is not a spending bill, my friends. This is a budget reconciliation bill. And what we're doing here is delivering the America First agenda. So it's absolutely true that the legislation does focus on, from a spending perspective, mandatory spending, and there's just very little that can be done there. There are some significant reforms to Medicaid that are expected to cut costs there. But the Speaker of the House also went on to say Musk seems, quote, pretty dug in right now, and I can't quite understand the motivation behind it. I'll let everybody draw their own conclusions about Elon's motivation. I mean, obviously the EV mandate going away, I'm sure, a concern for, the leader of Tesla and other things as well, but I think there's a lot of confusion out there about what the legislation is. Well, I would agree with the Speaker in that. That's something we went into great detail on yesterday. And maybe Elon needs the same information that, this is a reconciliation package that deals with mandatory spending, that the discretionary spending that Congress appropriates, we hadn't gotten to that yet. Now, as we informed yesterday, the White House did send over the $9.4 billion proposal to rescind spending previously approved on foreign aid, and also defund NPR and PBS, two things that I think people finally said, why are taxpayers paying for this nonsense that really don't reflect the values of the vast majority of Americans, including left-leaning Americans. They've got a crazy, woke, liberal, leftist agenda they're trying to promote and push, and it's not right that taxpayers fund that. I completely agree. So that is included in the rescission proposal tendered by the White House that hopefully the Congress will act on swiftly. And again, rescind all that spending. Man, some heads are going to roll. There are going to be some gnashing of the teeth on that. Oh my gosh, we're losing PBS and NPR. I think we'll survive without it. We're coming right back. Stay with us.
Mississippi. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Hey, you get closer. The lights are going dim. The sound of your breathing has made the mood I'm in.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. It's our pleasure to welcome now Roy Turner, Executive Director, Elvis Presley Birthplace. Hey, Roy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So tell us about Tupelo's Elvis Festival and all the events around that coming up.
Well, actually, we kicked everything off Tuesday evening with a literary look at how Elvis became the king of rock and roll here at the Birthplace, where Tom Brown interviewed two very distinguished authors about Elvis's early career. Last night we had our opening gala. Today, as we speak, we're getting ready to have the youth competition here at the Birthplace. And then tomorrow, this is Thursday, so tonight and tomorrow they will begin the competition to see who's going to be the next winner to represent Tupelo.
Very cool. So, Roy, why do you think there's still so much interest and intrigue with Elvis Presley?
Good question. Because so many people that come through here have been born after he left this world.
Yeah.
Yet his impact is still tremendous. I find, of course, they love his music, but I think they're even more intrigued with his story. I find it very interesting. I rarely, if ever, hear anybody from the USA make this comment. But most of our visitors, we have about 129,000 a year. Most of them are international travelers. And I can't tell you how many of them will say, Elvis was the American dream. He fulfilled the American dream. It's almost like a Cinderella story to them. And to be honest, it always has been to me. His story is so inspiring. He relates to young people today. We use him as a teaching tool with children. Born poor. So many children can relate to that today.
Yep.
Bullied, made fun of because of his hand-me-down clothes, because of his tenacity that he was going to play that guitar and sing, whether you wanted to hear him or not. The child of an ex-con. Kids today are dealing with that, so they can relate to that.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of school children come through. The Elvis movie a couple years ago certainly was a shot in the arm. It educated a lot of people. That's when I saw demographics change in younger people. It increased. And in African Americans, it increased.
Interesting.
But he still touches.
Yeah.
And his music touches people.
So do you find that maybe some of these young people, as you indicated, that weren't even born until after he left the earth, do they perhaps have an interest in emulating him and following his path?
Some do. In fact, we had one in here, this is Thursday, just this week, that was dressed Elvis-y. He was probably 11, and he had gotten interested in him in the last couple of years, and his mother and father said that's just all he listens to now, and all he wants to do is learn more about Elvis.
Wow. That's pretty neat. Roy,
Not many of us can have that kind of influence after we've left this world.
No doubt about it. It's iconic and will endure forever, I believe. What about people, Roy, who are not from Mississippi, are, of course, fans of Elvis and again know him, know his music, his movies, his work, and so forth, but maybe have never been to Mississippi, and they attend for the first time the Elvis Festival there in Tupelo? What sort of reaction do you sometimes see?
A lot of people are blown away by a number of things. Of course, Mississippi's always sort of had a bad rap in the press.
Yeah.
When they come here to the birthplace, they're expecting to see this little house. And they see this 15-acre, beautifully landscaped park with a museum, his childhood church, the chapel, statues, storyboards with quotes from people that knew him as a child. And they're blown away. They are also blown away by the hospitality. I'll see their post, or they'll tell me personally, everybody has been so open and so friendly and so helpful. Well, that is Mississippi. And it gives us a chance to showcase who we are as a state, because a lot of people are expecting Mississippi from maybe 40 or 50 years ago, unfortunately.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm just always interested, honestly, in the reaction from people, because you're right. They perhaps have a negative perception of the state, which is largely, I think, driven by the media in Hollywood, and then they get here and they find out it's not that way, and they're typically just shocked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is Mississippi's favorite son here, Elvis. I think goes a long way towards dispelling some of those negative misconceptions.
I was about to say, you can't have a better calling card than Elvis.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty cool. So how many people do you expect to be at the festival?
We have moved back to the Lyric Theater, which is historic for us. It's where Elvis went and saw films as a child. It's where he would go in the front door, and his African-American friend Sam Bell would go in the side door, and then they would sit together in the segregated section, and Sam said nobody ever bothered us. But unfortunately, it only holds about 450 people. So our crowd is limited in that we have less seating available.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's going to be a lot more intimate. That's where we started. And I'm really glad to see us go back to the Lyric. It ties a lot of the history, a lot of the Elvis history into the festival.
What?
In fact, he won his first talent show at the Lyric when he was 8 years old. It was put on by Baker and Baker Furniture, and he won free movie tickets for a week for he and his parents.
Huh. Interesting. Then you got the hardware store right there downtown where he purchased his first guitar. Is that right?
Yes, and I'm 73. It has looked and smelled that way my entire life. I'm sure it looked and smelled that way when Elvis was here. There's an X on the floor where he stood. The original oak counter where they bought the guitar is there. And it really is a step back in time. Tupelo Hardware is one of the jewels in our crown.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What about other recording artists and musical talent? What sort of interaction have you had with them about Elvis? Just because he inspired so many through the years. His style, his play, his tone.
Not all, but quite a few of the entertainers that play our arena here come out to the birthplace. In fact, one Saturday I got a phone call, and it was Josh Turner's manager, country western singer, and he had his family on a month-long vacation and would like to tour the birthplace, but would rather do it when we weren't so busy.
Yeah.
And it just turned out they were going to be here on a Sunday morning. We don't open until 1 o'clock. So I gave his family a personal tour. The actor William Forsythe, he's been in about 60 films over the years. He and his girlfriend were out here visiting and mentioned they would like to get married. So I I became their wedding planner.
Huh.
Got the photographer, got a blues singer. I said, do I need to get a preacher? He said, no, my best friend's a priest. He's coming to do the ceremony. And they keep in touch. Another actor, Joseph Cannon, who was very interesting because Joseph is African-American and a huge Elvis fan. And I said, how did you become an Elvis fan? He said, well, my grandfather listened to Elvis all the time. And I want to think he grew up in Chicago, but I'm not sure. I said, well, did your buddies not raise the devil with you listening to this racist? He said, yeah, but I told them different. I love those stories. Elvis, in his own way, changed our world. And I think it's a fine example for all of us. Elvis didn't intend to change anything. He was just doing his thing. But you drop a stone and it creates a ripple, and then that ripple can create a bigger wave, and eventually become a tsunami. But it starts with each one of us, starting our ripple. And Elvis certainly did many times.
Gotcha. Yeah. Roy, really appreciate you coming on. So tell us real quick the dates of the event. When does it get started?
Officially today. And we will announce a winner at noon tomorrow.
Okay.
Then we have some shows in the evening.
Gotcha.
With some real fine Elvis top-notch entertainers. Yep. And then Saturday morning we'll do our gospel. We normally had it on Sunday mornings.
We got to go. Appreciate it, Roy, Executive Director of the Elvis Presley Birthplace. Thank you.
The bet's made to order. Are we going to do this?
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
All your life you've waited for love to come and stay. And now that I have found you,
There you go, the Goodbye Girl. David Gates, best known for his role in the group, the 70s band Bread, soft rock. It's a good movie, though. Appreciate that. Rhino, right on cue on the all-hit request line. Larry from McGee says, usually when someone disagrees with Trump, he hits back hard. Why hasn't he done the same with Musk, in your opinion? I'm honestly not sure. I've wondered that as well. I think it's a matter of time. I'm not surprised, honestly. I predicted months ago, I thought that this love fest would eventually break up. And it's just two very high-powered personalities. Honestly, I think we're at a point now where Musk is kind of having a hard time accepting that, hey, you're not the president here. And so I know that...
I would argue against that. I would say he is expressing the feelings of a large swath of the population that isn't fully plugged into politics all the time, that don't understand that you cannot change the law very much, if at all, with a reconciliation bill. And the only way you get anything passed through Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in Congress, in the Senate, is with the reconciliation bill. I don't see why the Republicans haven't pivoted away from backbiting and slap fighting and all this nonsense back and forth and started the midterm campaign of, if you want real stuff done, give us 60 in the Senate. Until then, we can't do jack diddly squat.
I'm going to add, okay, I'll buy that. I'm going to add a little edit to that. Though I understand your point. You can't change spending that significantly in a reconciliation bill because you can't change law. Okay? You said can't change law. You're right. But the thing that Musk is complaining about is you're not really doing anything to address spending. And the point is, Mr. Musk, that we talked about yesterday, because you're limited on what you can do in terms of changing law that would change spending. Because you're only dealing with the mandatory programs, and you're limited on how much you can mess with there. Though the Republicans are boasting about the fact that, hey, we're cutting $1.5 trillion, and that mostly comes in the form of projected cost savings from the Medicaid reforms and the SNAP reforms. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not sure I'm totally in agreement that the reforms they're implementing will produce savings in that amount. Usually comes in lower than that. But it's fair game because it's the CBO that has to do all the calculations, and then the parliamentarian says, okay, yeah, I agree with that. Thus, you can pass this with, to your point, the simple majority. It's when you want to do serious reforms to those programs, which would change the spending trajectory in a more dramatic fashion, that's when you got to get the Democrats. And they ain't going to get on board with it. That's just
And we
fact.
have too many cowardly, spineless, yellow streak a mile wide up their back Republicans that are too dang worried about doing the right thing. And, well, if you don't do the reconciliation and you send it to the Senate, then the government shuts down and we get blamed for it. Well, you get blamed for it whether you're in power or not.
Yeah, I agree.
You got to deal with that.
I
Throw
agree.
a pair.
So this is why I would have liked to seen the focus just be a one-paragraph bill, not a 1,500-page bill with all kinds of crazy stuff in it, but one paragraph says, we hereby make the TCJA, the Trump tax cuts, permanent.
But
Let's
that
just
comes
get that
back to
done.
it ain't getting through the Senate. That would probably take 60 votes.
It might because it doesn't have the spending offsets the parliamentarian needs to see. Because unfortunately, the way the way they score it is not that we're not changing anything. They score it as compared to before the bill went into place, and that's just wrong the way that works in my view. So, yeah, it's It's process and rules, you could argue, are kind of in the way.
And it's process and rules that the vast majority of Americans
don't know.
Shouldn't have to know.
Agree.
Because
You're
we
totally
shouldn't
right.
have a political party, the Democrats, that are actively trying to destroy the country while lying to your face.
I completely agree. And if I see one more of them talk about taking health care away so we can give tax cuts to the rich people, I'm going to puke, because that's just a lie, and it's just wrong. That, of course, insinuates, well, yeah, they're entitled to health care, and you got to pay for it. That's just wrong. That's communism, in my opinion. We're stepping aside for a break. Fox News, SuperTalk News. Don't forget, it's Mayor of Jackson, John Horhn, at 12:05. Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on Super Talk, Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year or more. I hope she holds on a little longer. Send a letter.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're coming at you live today from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Friday Eve.
Today on In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, you'll hear an interview with business gurus Randy Harrington and Mike Farrell. In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar is presented by Superior Catfish. Remember, there's catfish, then there is Superior Catfish. It's U.S. farm-raised catfish with homegrown flavor. Ask for it by name at your favorite store or restaurant. Go to superiorcatfish.com for more info. The C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. Don't forget to go to elementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. So the Dow at this moment is turned into the green, into positive territory. The NASDAQ up as well. They've been kind of hopping around the unchanged line, the old rhino kangaroo. Mainly concerns over tariffs and reports from the president of working with Xi Jinping. Looks like there was a bit of a breakthrough, perhaps, on some of the rare earth minerals, some of the manipulation that's going on. I know you're shocked at that the Chinese Communist Party is engaged in, sort of known for not honoring their commitments. And that's what's going on here. So the president announcing that. Presently, he's at the White House. I'm watching him live on the screen right now.
Out of all the things they likely discussed, the one part of the conversation I would be most interested in at this point would be if they touched on the Chinese nationals trying to bring in the agro-terror fungus.
Yeah, somebody
and
just
what
said something.
was said about it.
Yeah, Michael in New Albany just said something about that on the C Spire text line as well. In China, is it not true that Harvard is considered the party school? I mean, that being the party, not as in have a good time sort of party, a recreational party, the Communist Party school, that they seem to carry their water more than they do American values. And that there's a move to stop that nonsense. The president yesterday signing an order banning entry of people from 12 different countries to enter this country. That's within the prerogative of the president, in my view. This is nuts that we've gotten to this point. The Democrats think we just ought to let everybody in, and it's just inhumane not to let people in that don't really have any business here. That's just wrong in my view. So now the president is, by the way, on the C Spire text line. Just read you a couple of things here. You, CC and Sanatobi, you're overthinking it. Musk is portraying that he doesn't like Trump anymore, so people will leave his Tesla dealerships and cars alone. I don't really think so. I think
nothing he can say or do will ever convince the purple-haired, power glasses-wearing, bleeding heart, nonsensical liberals that he is not Hitler reincarnate.
I agree. Another one here says he
Once
hasn't
that brain's
come out.
been washed, it don't get unwashed.
I don't think you can put that genie back in the bottle. On here it says he hasn't come out hard against Musk because he's worried about losing Musk's political cash donations and platform dominance going into the midterms.
That's more believable.
He, however, has said he's pretty much done. Now, to the extent we can rely on him, talking about Musk with his political contributions, I don't know.
Unless he feels like Republicans don't hold up their end of the bargain of trying to do at least something with the information he's provided them on government's waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah.
I could totally see him throwing money behind primary opponents.
I can too. Or maybe even Democrat. Lord help us if that were the case. Just because
I don't know that he goes that far. He's still got a pretty big chip on his shoulder about how they have attacked him, attacked his businesses, and done everything in their power to alienate him from his children.
That's absolutely true. I mean, he is viewed as just Satan to them, typically in their circles. I don't know that Trump's thinking about that as much as it is the fact that he's not supporting, his marquee legislation here, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. He just said, by the way, 2 reporters in the White House, not sure we'll have a great relationship anymore. So he's calling out Musk now. He's presently meeting with Chancellor, is it Merz, I think, is the chancellor currently? Friedrich Merz, I believe, is that how you pronounce it, is the chancellor of Germany. And he's in the White House talking to him. Came over from across the pond. I think they're talking trade deals. But he says, he doesn't understand why Musk, this is what Trump just said, is just now coming out. He knew what was planned in the tax bill all along. So he didn't say anything about it till now. Not really sure, not offering an explanation. He did say he's very disappointed with Elon Musk. So I think he's just starting to get in the groove of I guess, rebutting him at this point. And we'll see what else we may get out of the president. Brian on the C Spire text line says, why can't these politicians in D.C. just vote for what is best for this country? I wish it were that simple, Brian. It's because there's no consensus on what's best for the country.
Because people with that level of altruistic intentions don't generally have the dog-eat-dog, nearly sociopathic drive to be the center of attention enough to get elected.
I think that's a lot of truth to that. And that just tells me, as we've said many times, we've conferred too much benefit to public service. It's supposed to be public service, and it's not. And that's why people are willing to spend an inordinate amount of money just to secure seats in the U.S. House and Senate. What's really bizarre is the amount of money spent on a Supreme Court race where Musk was heavily involved in Wisconsin. Lost, by the way, despite the amount of money he and others dumped into that. And it largely it was driven by redistricting that is on the docket there in the state. And the concern is that given the balance of the court now, that Wisconsin is likely to lose some Republican seats. And when you got such a narrow margin in the House, every dang seat's become important in swing districts in particular, because that's what really determines the balance of power in the House. It's not the ones that are reliably red, reliably blue. It's all the others that can go either way on any given election cycle, which comes up every 2 years. So that's what's kind of going on there. But that's the latest from the president, is that he's disappointed in Musk and doesn't think they'll have a good relationship going forward. I think that's fair to say. My guess is Musk will not go away based on those comments. We'll see some writing from him, some posts from him.
His latest tack is on his Twitter account. He's retweeting old Donald Trump tweets that fly in the face of the current situation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I've seen that as well. So I just always felt like that ultimately this thing would kind of end up with the two in opposition, at odds with each other, in conflict, and that's exactly where we are. They're just two very strong personalities, and when you have that, you pretty much got to be fully aligned for that to work. And I think this is a situation where Musk is upset. I do think you're onto something here. I don't think he realizes that, what they're dealing with right now really would not involve including much of what was exposed by the Doge team, because it's a reconciliation bill that deals with mandatory spending. And again, as I said, now if they don't pass the $9.4 billion rescission package, which isn't a lot of money in the scheme of things, but it sets the tone. If they don't pass that, then we're going to unload on them, because that's a no-brainer in my view, some of the crazy spending, including defunding of NPR and PBS. By the way, my friend Fred Shanks, representative in Mississippi, said that he supported ending funding for PBS here in Mississippi in the special session. He said they actually came close to ending it in the special session as part of the budget. So he says, I vote no every year on that. I hope that maybe they'll pick that up where it left off. There'll be some momentum there. I think people are kind of tired of this. Is really not an appropriate function of government in my view. If they want to operate, that's fine. You already get most of your money from the private sector. How about just going ahead and getting all of it from the private sector? None from government. If for no other reason at the federal level, because we ain't got it. That never comes up in the discussion. We spend more than we take in. We ain't got any money for that. So it's time for a break with Aretha Franklin bumping us out of this segment. Coming right back from the Element Well studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so awesome.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
People of the earth, can you hear me? Came a voice from the sky on that magical night. And in the colors of 1,000 sunsets, they traveled through the world on a silvery light. The people of the earth stood waiting.
So the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, strange bedfellows here, Rhino, with our old friend, how about a beer, hun, Liz Warren. They align on something. They have agreement on something. Eliminating the debt ceiling. She's been calling for it for a while. And the president also finds himself in agreement with Senator Warren. Says on Truth Social, I am very pleased to announce that after all of these years, I agree with Senator Elizabeth Warren on something. The debt limit should be entirely scrapped to prevent an economic catastrophe. It is too devastating to be put in the hands of political people that may want to use it despite the horrendous effect it would have on our country and indirectly even the world. Well, he's certainly right if we didn't increase the debt ceiling to allow the government to continue borrowing money. That would be a catastrophe, because that means we would default on lots of our obligations, and man, that would end the country as we know it. No doubt about that. But it also suggests that we need to focus on addressing our deficit and debt. Now, the CBO came out with a report that just in the last 24 hours that the president is touting, and that is that his tariff plan would cut deficits by $2.8 trillion over a 10-year period. Now, what they're saying there is that the additional revenue from tariffs, and again, all that really does is looks at the current level of imports and applies the various tariff rates that have been implemented, and those are complicated, and says, okay, yeah, that produced this much revenue, and therefore that would be an offset, additional revenue, which would reduce, theoretically, deficits by that amount. It doesn't mean that the bill itself will shrink deficits by $2.8 trillion. It just means that the tariffs specifically would. Just as, however, the way they score it, the various tax provisions would increase deficits. So what's important is what's the net of all this, and there's no consensus on that. And the CBO, of course, does produce analyses and projections along those lines. But here's what else that the CBO said. And the president went to his social media platform, Truth Social, to share this news with the country. And I'll read it. This just came out a few minutes ago. Shockingly, the Democrat-controlled CBO just announced that the tariffs will be reducing the deficit by at least $2.8 trillion. Too bad this information couldn't have been released earlier. It would have kept people from knowingly saying untruths. So again, that however, does rely on the fact that imports remain level. Imports were down 50% last month, though tariff revenue was up relative to last year in the same month, in the month of May, about 100%. Last year we collected about $10 billion, 10 plus and change. This year, 22 and change in tariff revenue, so more than doubling. But that despite the fact that imports were down. Now, Walmart, Target, others say they're raising prices, even though the president sort of implored them not to, encouraged them not to. And you've seen this. There are videos now of Walmart and Target employees showing the staff changing prices on stuff on the shelves right now, putting new barcodes in them and so forth. So
feels like it's being a bit over dramatic.
I agree.
Because, I mean, prices change on a near weekly basis for a large number of products on the shelves of any retail establishment.
They do.
Especially a big box store.
But it's also true, though, that the CEOs of both of these companies have said, yeah, we got to. We can't do it. We can't absorb all this tariff stuff. We can some of it, but not of it, all the tariff costs. So the CBO also said, however, is part of this report where they predict that tariff revenue would cut deficits by $2.8 trillion. They said it would shrink the economy, raise the inflation rate, and reduce purchasing power of households. So I also think that if the goal is to repatriate, reshore companies from their operations by moving their operations from other countries into this country, that, of course, would have a negative effect on tariffs because there'd be no tariff levied on goods produced here. I think that's the ultimate goal. So it's hard to predict, where this tariff revenue situation is going, where the rates are ultimately going to settle, what's going to be reshored, what's going to stay abroad, how it will affect the value of imports, the basis of tariff revenue. It's really hard to predict. So, and that's what CBO's doing. They're trying to predict all this. However, they don't look at it quite as dynamically as I just described. That's one of the complaints about the CBO's scoring model. They just look at raw data and assume sort of things stay the same moving forward. Interesting. Ben from Madison says, no doubt the big, beautiful bill is getting a little more pushback from House Republicans. Still think they get something to the president's desk, but but it could get squirrely if things keep dragging out. Haven't seen as much out of House Republicans, Ben, as I have Senate Republicans because they've got control of the legislation right now. The exception would be Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I think Chip Roy joined in yesterday. Our finding out after the fact, apparently, that there's a provision after the fact, meaning after you voted for it there, Marjorie, there is a provision in the bill that would prohibit states from enacting any sort of regulation of artificial intelligence. Now, I personally oppose that provision. And Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, yesterday responded, doubled down, no, that's staying in. He said, I was disappointed in that, honestly. I do think that states should have the power. I kind of get their rationale for it, but I disagree that we should rely on and be subjected to federal regulation of this important area. I think that should be the purview of the states, and consistent with the 10th Amendment and states' rights and federalism. We'll see where that lands, but right now, Marjorie Taylor Greene has indicated that she's pretty upset about that. I just really wish that she would and others would have noticed that before they voted for it and passed it on to the Senate, but that's where it stands right now. And she has been, in the last 24 hours, the most vocal opponent, noting that provision which she disagrees with.
Because she has no shame.
Sure seems like it, but she definitely came out.
I mean, if she were as altruistic as some people would like to think she is, she's just sticking to her guns, she says what she means, then, well, how do you justify voting on something you didn't read? And then how do you come out and say, well, I didn't read it even though I told everybody I did?
Yeah. So what the
and then turn it into a 24-hour marathon of getting in front of as many cameras as possible.
There's no doubt about that. And so the Speaker of the House said that it has national security implications, overriding state-level concerns. And so looks like that's kind of teeing up a bit of a showdown between Greene and the backers of this moratorium in the House. The Speaker said, I've been talking to Marjorie about that. We have to be careful not to have 50 different states hyper-regulating AI because it has national security implications, Johnson told reporters. If some of the deep blue states smother it with regulation, as they're prone to do, then it might hamper our development, and it could put us in a compromised position against our enemies, China and others. I think that there's a federal response that's appropriate here. Well, he may be right, but is it not possible perhaps to limit it in that respect to those matters which are more germane to the federal level?
He's not right. If say California comes out and says, well, you're killing too many trees by burning all this energy, we're going to put a cap on how many whatevers you can use to do your AI, they'll just leave California.
I think you're right. Now, so Greene, by the way, now says, gee, if I'd have known this was in the bill, I would have voted no. You're a U.S. representative. Oh, my gosh. We're coming right back. If I'd have known.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will, what a thrill. Girl, in this wreck is just quitting balls of fire. I let that love all I thought it was funny. You came along and you moved, and honey, I changed my mind.
Don't forget that we've got newly elected Mayor of Jackson, State Senator John Horhn, joining Middays at 12:05. I just don't see the reason, this is on the C Spire text line, for not allowing states to regulate other than the AI lobbyists getting their way. There are AI lobbyists at the state level, too, so that really doesn't, at the federal level, I should say. I apologize, because it's a big industry, and they've all lobbied up, as any big industry, especially an evolving industry, would be. And I do think...
I don't know that you would find many AI lobbyists lobbying in favor of any regulation.
Only if they're representing companies where regulation would somehow perhaps be detrimental to their competitors but beneficial to them. It just depends on what part of the industry they're in, because it's huge. There are so many different moving parts to it, so many different players. It's, not just those who produce the end user software, for example, that we would typically point to, yeah, that's AI. Behind the scenes, all this massive data center build out that powers all that, and then included in that, of course, is all of the elements, the components, and the ingredients, and the building blocks of all those facilities and all that technology, the energy industry, construction industry, all the above. So, I personally, I think the speaker's just convinced that, yeah, we got to do this at the federal level, as he said, for national security reasons. I disagree. Would it make possible perhaps to maybe pass some sort of federal guidelines, framework, even restrictions?
If you're really concerned about national security and it's not just a ploy for government overreach, then you just simply word it as you are not allowed to export any of your AI tools, processes, policies, development kit, like any, you can't export it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
You wouldn't make it say that states can't regulate it on their own.
Yeah, agree. I can't, though, get my head around anything at this point. And look, there's still a lot we don't know, because this is evolving, burgeoning, and every day there's something new, which is good. That's true of any major revolutionary innovation, and this may be the biggest in our history. And I think if you look throughout history, you have to think about everything that's invented today as a building block of something tomorrow. And the more of these building blocks and tools that we create, the more at the disposal of innovators to create new tools. I've always thought that's what drives the wealth gap in the country, is that the people that are really innovative and creative and are willing to make the commitment and the sacrifice, such as an Elon Musk, as an example, such as a Jeff Bezos, what they're really doing is leveraging all these tools that somebody else created, but they figured out a way to use them to create something new. And that's what's going on here. And AIs would exist were it not for the massive improvements that have been made and all the underlying technology and infrastructure that drives it. If we were still using 1990s technology, heck, if we were still using middle 2000s technology, we couldn't do this. It's
not at this scale, no.
No.
Mid-2000s technology, we were at the point where if you had centralized enough computing power, you could do it at one location with one input-output terminal.
That's absolutely true. But there's been significant improvements in performance of the primary driver of artificial intelligence from a compute perspective, and that's the graphics processing unit, and NVIDIA was responsible for that. Little did they know when they were building this for video games that, hey, this happens to be exactly what we need for artificial intelligence. And look what it's done to that company and all the companies now that, because I was reading some reports yesterday how Dell and HP, HP has the HPE division, the HP Enterprise division, now incorporating, doing deals with NVIDIA where they're building dual processor servers, and it was Supermicro that invented that 20 years ago because they figured, hey, if we have two processors here and one handles kind of the routine functions, processing functions, but we hand off these more complex functions that are better suited for what NVIDIA made, we can have a higher performing compute platform. That's what they did. Now that's become commonplace.
And NVIDIA, for the most part, was developing that technology to provide better graphics for video games and better computing power for movies to make CGI.
That's absolutely true. There was a big movement going on then with CGI.
Like the jump from Doom on your PC in the 90s, where it's all flat and everything's all kind of wonky and you're not really aiming, you're just kind of pointing. It's incredibly fun and addictive, but the jump from that to photorealistic graphics and ray tracing and water that looks like a mirror when the light hits it just perfectly, all that required more and more and more powerful computing power. The same way Hollywood developing the technology to, we need to make the fur on the Monsters Inc. monsters move realistically. Well, we need more computing power. It's going to take 3 years to do this.
If you've ever been on the Flight of Passage ride at Disney, the Pandora ride, it's probably one of the most popular. That's exactly what that is, computer-generated imagery. So CGI. You know, there was a company that did a long time ago made devices, compute platforms that were specifically made to optimize CGI. It's a company called Silicon Graphics, SGI. I believe they're out of Huntsville, Alabama. They were there primarily because of all the NASA and all the space operations.
Yeah, because before video games and CGI in movies became a big money maker, the only real way to make money in improving computing was through government money, tax dollars, and NASA.
True. That's true. And remember when Steve Jobs was ousted from Apple, he went and created a company called Next. And it was a competitor to SGI. And it was, again, focused on super high-powered, high-quality, fast and efficient generation of images. The company didn't do very well. He just didn't have a good marketing plan. Interesting stuff, though. Let's see. Blake in the Delta said, none of them read the bills. They're over 1,000 pages. Not that it makes it right. Single-issue bills are somewhat mundane, but it keeps crap like this from happening. I'm not sure why everything the president wants done has to be in one big, beautiful bill. The best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
And that's what I was talking about. Like, there's no reason for Blake in the Delta to have to know the inner workings of the policy wonks in the Capitol.
Yeah.
There's no reason Blake in the Delta should have to know that we got to have this big, beautiful bill or else it's not getting through the Senate because we can't get 60 votes in the Senate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would have liked to seen it handled that way, but look, it's not unusual that the party, when the party controls the Congress, in particular the House, where these spending bills originate and these reconciliation bills generally originate, that if that's the same as the party of the White House, they're going to do everything they can to accommodate the agenda as requested. So in this case, this is what the president wanted. Now, he made these promises on the campaign trail, which were very popular, to exempt tips, overtime, Social Security, restore deductibility of interest, automobile interest, things like that. And so that immediately complicates it because there are budgetary implications. So you got to add this other stuff to offset that, to pass it on reconciliation. Next thing you know, you got a 1,000-page bill. That's what happens.
Or you do it individually and you can get it through the House, you send it to the Senate, and not a single Democrat's going to vote for it, so it doesn't pass, and we're stuck again with the cowardly and lazy Republicans because they're cowardly. They won't push back on anything, it seems like.
Yeah.
And they're lazy because they won't even send it to the Senate for the Democrats to vote against all the crap they've been saying they want.
That's absolutely true. So as an example,
we're the Democrats. We fight for the working man. All right, cool. No tax on tips. No, Trump said it. We're not voting for it. You can do so much in the narrative with that, but they're so chicken.
Totally true. Because if you just had a bill that said no tax on tips, you got to have 60 votes to pass that in the Senate. But when you put
and
it
you
in
wouldn't get a single Democrat to do it, and you could hold their feet to the fire for not being for the working man. But no, we have lazy, chicken Republicans in Congress.
So we're just making the point that this is how we ended up with a 1,100-page bill. Is exactly how, because they're trying to fold all that into a reconciliation bill. So this may shock some people. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, it passed on these means. It ultimately, because when Ted Kennedy died, they lost their 60 votes in the Senate. They had to water it down, come up with a reconciliation bill, which is what this big, beautiful bill is. That's how we got Obamacare, without Republicans supporting it. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
belly up of Mississippi.
Come on.
Middays with Gerard Gibert
All right, we are back.
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate you joining us. Ben from Madison says, if there is a breakdown, don't think there will be in parentheses. I like your idea, Gerard. Just pass a one-paragraph bill extending the TCJA, which, by the way, can be done using the reconciliation process with a simple majority. But this is another situation where...
But then none of the Republicans in the House and Senate get to take their bite at the apple, and they would be upset.
Everybody's looking to something that they can claim and
something they can campaign on
and attribute themselves to. That's correct. So, and this kind of goes back to why don't they just do what's in the best interest of the country? Because there's no consensus on what's the best interest of the country. The reps in New York, Republican reps, would say that what's in the best interest of the country is raising the SALT cap, for example, to help my constituents so I can keep my seat. Well, that's not in my best interest here in Mississippi, as an example. So that's just how polarized we are, I think, in the country. We find little that we agree on, and it causes it to be very difficult to make law. Someone on the C Spire text line said, on the 662, have y'all seen the Palantir stuff about Trump getting them to create a database on all Americans? I have, and that has, in fact, received lots of backlash from Mr. Trump's MAGA base. They're concerned about this plan that they believe would just give the government more information about Americans and
more than they already have.
Yeah, and just, I guess, facilitate more spying and profiling.
I don't know how they could get more than they already have.
Yeah, I think that's arguably true, but this is a bit misunderstood. This is not really collecting more information; it's centralizing it, so that you could have kind of a single point of view. In the IT business, by the way, we call that a single pane of glass. Literally, that's the concept when you design software. Single pane of glass that you can start at a high level and what we call drill down into more details behind these aggregate data. And that's got a lot of people thinking, wow, this would be like an unnerving sort of citizen database. And yes, he's talked about, the president has, engaging the services of Palantir. Now, Palantir that's what they do. They're a data analytics company. They make fantastic tools for that purpose. So what Palantir says is, okay, you got all this data, same thing we have in the government, and you got it stored in all these multiple systems, Mr. Company, Mr. Corporation, but you need some way to view through a single point of glass and analyze and aggregate and correlate all that information into data points that could support decision making. And what these guys do is they make software that, in fact, does just that. You configure it, you control it. It's complicated. It's very sophisticated software, but for a major company, they've got plenty of people, and they engage the services of consultants that help them with that. And the idea, of course, is rather than having these silos of data all over the place, it just aggregates, combines that so that decision makers in particular, executives, managers, administrators, and so forth, can have this single place where they go to see this data without having to go to 40 different places and do a bunch of calculations in their head and and run a bunch of queries and stuff. It's really pretty cool. So you
Don't they
combine.
already have contracts with the military?
They do. And so when you combine that with artificial intelligence, it just even ramps up the power of it more. So I would encourage you guys to think about this. One of the things that the Doge team has uncovered is that these systems don't communicate. They don't talk to each other. And so American citizen data lives in multiple systems operated by the swath of agencies. And they make decisions often.
With a wide range of competency.
Right. Exactly. And so lots of decisions are made within the scope of these agencies with their data that they're supposed to query, if you will, and research data stored in other systems that first they don't, secondly it's unreliable. And so this is an attempt to address that problem. So we end up making hundreds of billions of dollars of improper payments, or we don't have the data we need to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse because we have these gazillion siloed independent systems. This is an attempt to address that. I applaud the president. However, we need guardrails on this. I know that's easier said than done. We're stepping aside for a break. It's Fox News and SuperTalk News. When we return, it's State Senator John Horhn, now the mayor of Jackson.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays, live from the Element Wealth Studios, SuperTalk, Mississippi, on this
Friday Eve.
We're pleased to welcome now State Senator John Horhn. He represents Mississippi's District 26 that incorporates Hinds and Madison counties, serves as the chairman of the Senate Housing Committee, but more importantly, as of Tuesday, looks like he's all set to be the newly elected mayor of the capital city of Jackson there. Senator Horhn, thanks for coming in. Congratulations, sir.
Great to be here, Gerard.
Yeah, big night.
Yeah.
All right, so for the record now, how many times have you run for this office? This is the 4th. That's what I thought.
You know, I've been talking about the little engine that could, and the fact that perseverance pays off sometimes.
So the first task, of course, was the primary in April, where you were facing an incumbent. It's pretty unusual to defeat an incumbent, but you did in convincing style.
Yeah, well, we had a field of 12 Democrats in the primary, and we got about 49% of the vote.
Yeah.
Almost won it outright, but we were forced into a runoff with the incumbent, and we took that race 75% to 25.
Incredible. And so, and then went on to the general election, which occurred this past Tuesday, and once again won in dominant fashion. That's incredible.
Took 67% in that race, and we're really gratified. Actually, we like the fact that more people came out in the general election than they did in the runoff.
Oh wow!
Yeah, we had about 26,000 in the primary, 23,000 in the in the runoff. And then about just under 25,000 in the general election.
Well, you know, in the political world, we'd say that's a landslide.
Well, we're calling it a mandate.
A mandate. Okay, I like that. Great for you. Touche. All right, so I got to ask you, what you know, the city of Jackson is beset with just a myriad of problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your priorities? What are you going to start working on?
You know, Gerard, you could play pin the tail on the donkey, and wherever you stick that tail, you got a problem that needs immediate attention.
Yeah.
But one thing that we know we've got to deal with is that getting in when we are 1st of July. You're right at the start of a massive budget preparation for the 2026 fiscal year. And so we've got to get that and make that top of mind. We've got to deal with our bond rating and try to get the audits that have been late in being turned in for the last 3 or 4 years. Get that done so we can get our bond rating back. We've got to look at putting a good team of folks together to address a lot of the issues with the state. With the city. I'm still in my state mode. But to deal with a lot of issues top of mind as far as leadership team is, of course, the police chief, and then looking at a good public works director. Our public works department is decimated, and a lot of the basic services that citizens look for to be provided by public works just aren't there.
Yeah.
And so that's top of mind. And the other thing, and we've been talking about this over the course of the campaign, is the restoration of trust and accountability by city government. The taxpayers and the folks who pay the bills don't trust the city's government any longer, and that certainly is true of its governmental partners. The county has a fractured relationship with the city. The state certainly has a fractured relationship, and also the federal government. So we've got to restore that level of trust that we can say what we're going to do and then do what we said we were going to do. And so that's going to be not an overnight restoration, but we got to start somewhere. And I think that with our election, that's a good start because we've got a good working relationship with the folks at the county. In fact, most of the members, including President Robert Graham, endorsed my campaign. We have the relationship with the state from being there 32 and a half years in the state Senate. And I've had some really positive and productive conversations with everyone from the governor on down in the leadership of the legislature as well as in the executive branch with the governor to say, hey, congratulations, ran a good race. We want to help Jackson. Tell us what you need.
Okay.
And then we've had meetings with the federal judge who's in charge of our wastewater system. And we've got to demonstrate to him that we can manage our own affairs and manage our own assets. And I think once we do that, we're hopeful that we'll be able to convince him to return that water system to us. But I think everybody contemplates that regardless of who controls the wastewater system, you actually do need a third-party manager or administrator for that system, someone who knows what they're doing from a day-to-day standpoint, who has expert understanding and experience of how the system is supposed to work and how to properly manage and operate it. And then members of the congressional delegation, you probably are aware that Congressman Thompson endorsed me as well.
Yeah.
And we've had really productive conversations with him and with the staff of the U.S. senators, Senator Hyde-Smith and Senator Wicker, both of whom I served with in the state Senate. So we've got a good relationship there, too. So we think that we're going to be able to hit the ground running.
Well, I didn't hear you mention the city council.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Talk about that.
Then there's that. No, actually, all the members that I know who have served and are serving on the council, I've got a great working relationship with. The young lady who won in 6, I don't know. We're going to have to build a relationship there, and we're still uncertain as to who won and won. Because that's a really exciting race where it's almost a 3-way tie.
Yeah.
And so they're still counting the affidavits and trying to determine who actually won that race.
Yeah.
But, I've been talking about putting together a comprehensive plan from day one. That's something that the city, because I feel like we're flying blind without having a roadmap of where we're going and what our priorities are. And I want the council to participate heavily in that. I want the citizenry to participate heavily in developing that comprehensive plan. And I think it'll cut down on a lot of the bickering and the rancor that we have grown accustomed to seeing in the city council meetings and as they take place. And if my view is that, look, if we're going to disagree, fine, nobody's going to always agree. But let's take it in the back room and hash this thing out and then come out and speak with one voice.
Yeah, I in my business career attended a number of city council meetings because we were a vendor and often on the docket, and I've witnessed some of that myself. So I certainly know what you're talking about. It seems like maybe Little grandstanding going on there for the press, you think, for the media?
I think some of that involves grandstanding, and some of it is actual frustration because a lot of times the council felt as if they were left in the dark.
Okay.
And in the legislature, and that's what the city council is, the city's legislature. I can't tell you what kind of showing out and for the press would happen in the legislature if a state agency refused to give us information as legislators.
That's true. That's a good point.
And to see the city council be stonewalled by the executive branch sometimes makes no sense to me. We're all in this together, and you ought to have you're managing and covering the budget. You make the decisions on the budget, and if you can't get information and gather data to help you make better informed decisions, we got a problem.
Yeah. So what about the current mayor, Chokwe Lumumba? Has he been in contact with you? Has he provided some assistance to make the transition?
Thus far, I have not heard from the mayor. I think he and his administration were pretty bitter with the outcome of the race. Maybe we'll hear from them before it's over, but thus far we have not heard from them.
Well, how do you just take over? I mean, are they just cleaning out the drawers and the desk, or how does that work?
Well, we're plowing ahead. We've got some good people around us who have experience with city governments and their operations. People also at the state level who are going to come over to assist us a little bit in terms of looking at that budget. So we're just plodding ahead as best we know how.
Okay.
And we actually, quite frankly, believe that we're going to be recasting a lot of city government anyway. So we'll start with a blank canvas.
Okay. So I assume by recasting, you may make some personnel changes there? Is that what you're thinking?
Oh, I think we can expect personnel changes at the many of the leadership positions in city government, but we're not going to do it as a blanket dismissal. We're going to call people in and see what they bring to the table.
Okay.
If it fits in with our vision, then there's a home for you.
Okay.
If it doesn't fit with our vision or the direction in which we want to go, then we may have to part ways.
I got you. Well, that's the prerogative of the executive branch, right?
That's right.
That's the way it works. No, that happens at all levels of government. If you can hang around, we keep talking.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, we got State Senator John Horhn about to be officially the mayor of the city of Jackson, Mississippi, the capital city. We're in the Element Wealth studio, coming right back.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
With you in the Element Wealth studio, it's State Senator John Horhn, newly elected as the mayor of the capital city of Jackson. So you got a lot of work to do coming ahead of you. You know that, but you've signed up for it, accepting that.
Right.
And I'll read a couple of texts here on the C Spire text line. Ben from Madison says, really rooting for Mayor-elect Horhn. Our whole state is better with a strong capital city. Agree, Ben. If anybody can fix things in Jackson, I believe Mr. Horhn can do it. That's on the 662 on the C Spire text line. So, you know this. You got a lot of people. You got some that are pulling against you because maybe they're a little bitter and a little sour about the circumstances and the outcome. But you know the vast majority of the people in the state are pulling for you. Want to see you succeed.
Yeah, and I guess the biggest thing we've got to do, Gerard, is manage expectations. We didn't get the way we've gotten overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. And so we're going to have to manage expectations that we can't wave a magic wand and fix all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think we'll have some really good things right out the chute that we can look at.
Okay.
The way we deal with our policing in the city, We got to put more sworn officers on the streets. We've got to give them better equipment, better pay, better technology, better training, and improve the relationship between Capitol Police, the Sheriff's Department, and JPD. It's a good relationship right now, but it can be improved. And one of the things that legislation called for, House Bill 1020, was for the city to put together a memorandum of understanding between it and Capitol Police. For whatever reasons, this administration has not done that. So we're going to work immediately on putting an MOU together so we all kind of know where our lanes are and how we're going to handle issues as they come up. The other thing, right now, Hinds County is the only county in the state that does not have a workforce training and development center. And so we've been working for several months to correct that. And have had great conversations with Accelerate Mississippi, and Courtney Taylor's been a dream to work with over there.
Runs Accelerate,
Yes, to put together some training for plumbers, electricians, data technicians, cable splicers, folks who do broadband deployment. Because those jobs are out there right now, and it can't find folks to fill them. Exactly, and so we're hoping to put what she calls a talent solutions center. The first one to be located, hopefully, in the central Mississippi area, and will address the fact that we don't have a center here, and then also set the tone for how we're looking at training going forward, where training is done in a more nimble and efficient fashion. Using the community college system, but also using private and nonprofit providers. You can be private sector, you can be nonprofit, but if you can provide that training, they'll Accelerate will provide the equipment, the teachers, the trainers, and pay trainees a stipend of $10 to $15 an hour to go through an 8 to 12 week training program. So we're hoping to be able before the summer to announce that. We've also just recently, in the last month, been able to get the Capitol Complex Improvement District to provide to the Jackson Fire Department an early alert warning system funding to build up our system, which is archaic, over 50 years old. And it will not only serve the CCID footprint, but the entire city of Jackson. And that's the first CCID project that does the whole city.
Okay. So what do you think, Senator, that we need to do to make Jackson more of a destination for business investment, business formation? Do you see that as a critical part of the strategy to address the city's problems?
It's got to be, but first things first.
Yeah,
Gerard.
Sure.
You know, we got to get a stronger level of safety. In the city. We've got to clean up the joint. Jackson is in so many parts of it just looks absolutely horrible. And so the litter, the dilapidation, the burnout houses, the tax forfeited properties that are just sitting
overgrown,
over the weeds and the overgrowth. It's just so we hear that there's $6.5 million. That is available at the Office of HUD and at the federal level, at the federal building downtown. And if indeed that's true, we're going to get that $6 million. It can be used for blight and blight elimination, and we're going to focus first on South Jackson and then move to West Jackson if that money indeed is there. But we've got to get people used to receiving basic services again in Jackson. You know, that the water comes out safe and drinkable, and that when you flush the toilet, the stuff goes where it's supposed to go. The pothole issue has got to be dealt with in a more efficient and longer lasting level. And we've got to figure out how we're going to repair, actually redo a lot of our streets, and we've got to right size the city. This city is built for 250,000 people, and there are 144,000 people here. So we're having to deal with the infrastructure, take care of that infrastructure for 250,000, when in fact that population is no longer here. So how do we right size the city and cut down on our outlay from having to try to do 250,000? and we've been working with a group called the Reinvestment Fund out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that specializes in working with marginalized communities to help bring them back, working on housing, commercial and retail development. But the first thing that they're going to do is a market value analysis of Jackson to see what our infrastructure looks like. You know, what are we? How many streets? How many bridges? What are our major assets? Where's the stuff that needs major work, so forth? And we're going to use that as the basis for putting together a comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So once we do all that, then we can start talking about economic development.
So you mentioned just boosting the number of law enforcement officers in the city. The last time I looked, it was down like 300 or 400 from what you should have. What does that look like now?
The count was 262 sworn officers.
Okay.
Now, because of Capitol Police, they've got about 150 officers, so that helps a whole lot. My question is whether we're maximizing that relationship along with the sheriff's department to get the kind of coverage we need citywide.
Yeah.
But we do need more sworn officers who wear the JPD uniform. But we also need better equipment, better technology. Some guys have to wait when their shift, before they can begin their shift, they have to wait for the other guy to come in from his shift because they don't have a car and they have to use that guy's car to go on their shift. So we need a better rolling stock of police vehicles.
Yeah.
And it's just some very basic things, but I'm optimistic that there are resources at the federal level, especially that we can go to help beef up our law enforcement and public safety efforts.
Okay. So the city, last I checked, still has in place these procurement policies that provide preferential treatment to what they call MBEs, minority business enterprises. That policy's been in place for decades. Is this something you expect to continue, or are you open to some reforms there?
Well, I'm for continuing. I think that the city of Jackson has got to help build its minority business population. We're an 82% black city, and if we don't have a strong economy amongst in our black community, our black business community, we're not going to survive as a city. But the program probably needs to be tweaked a little bit better and made more efficient, and make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for problems in the future. What we are trying to do, or will be trying to do, is to increase the capacity and capabilities of a lot of our small businesses. So I expect that we're going to do some sort of a clearinghouse, either that's run by the city or that's facilitated by the city. It says, hey, you're a brick mason, but you don't know how to keep your books. And so as a service to you, we're going to create a clearinghouse, and it may be that 10 or 12 brick masons use the same accountant or accounting firm or whatever to keep the books, make sure the taxes are paid, make sure that you have all the legal things you need, licenses and certifications.
Take care of the back office functions.
Back office, exactly.
Okay.
So I see us doing that, and we're not going to give contracts to minority vendors just to be giving contracts to minority vendors.
Okay.
It's got to be a part of a process where we're building the small business and the local business economy and that business community.
Okay. I understand. So, sounds like it's something you're willing to at least pursue some degree of reforms to.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
It needs to be reformed.
Right.
There's a little room for abuse that we've seen over the years. We're going to cut that out.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that have enriched themselves by inserting themselves in some of these contracts, and they provide little or no value as part of it.
They've been able to leverage relationships, and some of it has not been for the benefit of the entire city.
Senator John Horhn, newly elected mayor. When you get sworn in, we got to go. But when you get sworn
July 1st.
July 1st, you'll become officially.
Inaugural activities.
Yes,
Gerard.
sir. Thank you. I plan to be there. Senator John Horhn, the newly elected mayor of the city of Jackson. We'll be calling you Mayor John Horhn pretty soon. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Gerard.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk, Mississippi.
the grass, walking down the road. Tell me, how long you gonna stay here, Joe? Some people say this town don't look good in snow. You don't care, I know. Ventura Highway.
That, of course, is America. One of their big hits, Ventura Highway. That, of course, out there in California. It's really cool. Jerry Beckley. And who's the other? Dewey, what was his last name? Can't remember. Dewey Bunnell, yeah. They were kind of the headliners of the group. Willie Leacock's on the drums. I think he passed away, if I'm not mistaken. But fantastic music there from America. That's back when all the cool people back in the big hair rock and roll era said, no, I'm not into that stuff. I'm into the much more pure acoustical style music, you know. Pretty cool. So, appreciate Senator John Horhn, about to be referred to as Mayor John Horhn. I'll tell you this, Rhino. I was impressed in that I felt like when he was running his campaign, early on, we talked to him, you recall, didn't get a whole lot of specifics. You know, this is kind of the strategy and the vision and the things we're going to work on. Not the case today. He's got a pretty comprehensive slate of things he wants to do. So I was impressed. And by the way, folks, and you know where I'm going here, no notes to go through their agenda. A lot of times they'll come in, you know, that's fine. I'm not condemning or criticizing those people that do that, but I just think it's good when you're elected to a position like that and you start spouting off your plans without relying on notes to do so. Am I being unfair in that?
No, I mean, just from the pure optics of it, someone seems more sincere if they're looking at you and talking to you versus looking at the paper and reading off the paper.
And the former is exactly what he did here during this interview. So I'm impressed with that.
As far as the minority participation, I don't know that even with his hesitance to eliminate it and his willingness for some reform, that will really matter, because all it's going to take is one lawsuit against it, and it very well may go the way of the dodo thanks to the unanimous Supreme Court decision that reverse discrimination is discrimination.
Just handed down today, right? Was it yesterday or today? And tell the folks about that, an employment case.
Yeah, it was an employment case dealing with as the media is coining her, a straight white woman that believed she had been discriminated against based on her sexuality and her skin color.
Yeah.
And she brought the case before the court. The Supreme Court heard it and voted unanimously, which is a little surprising, to
I'm shocked at
overturn a now decades-long precedent that required anyone who was white, heterosexual, or male to reach a higher burden of proof that they had been discriminated against, and that in and of itself is discrimination.
Exactly right. And so I was pleased to see this decision as well. There's numerous articles written about it. I can't remember the lady's name who ultimately was the main person in the suit. Who's the employer? Was it Citibank? I don't know why I want to say that's who it was, but I could be, don't quote me on that, I could be totally wrong. But it was interesting. They just struck this thing down and said, nope, can't do that. And I think it's good. It's an employment case. White, straight woman. Wasn't that kind of interesting? I didn't expect to see that, I guess, printed that way in all the various reports about it. But yeah, it's reverse discrimination. And they said, yeah, in fact, this is This is
This
discrimination.
case in question was a lady named Marlene Ames.
Okay.
And she was filing suit against the Ohio Department of Youth Services.
I see that. There's something else going on with Citibank. You know what I'm thinking about? It's the debanking of conservative businesses. I think they have reversed course on that. That's what I was thinking about, which is, I say, is a win for the anti-DEI movement. You know, they all went crazy there for a while that, oh yeah, if you're involved in selling guns or I don't know anything else that they deem kind of conflicts with the crazy woke liberal agenda, then they weren't so friendly to you as a bank, which is just dumb because you're in the banking business. You shouldn't really care unless they're breaking the law. And that nothing these companies were doing were breaking the law. But that's right. It's Ohio was the employer, this group in Ohio. And so they agreed that she faced a higher hurdle, is what they said, to sue her employer as a straight woman than if she'd been gay, and that just ain't right. I was shocked at the unanimous decision.
What's even more surprising is who wrote the opinion.
And
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is the one that authored the opinion with the unanimous vote against it.
I'm shocked, but I'm going to offer this and get your reaction. What if it had been a white male? Think we would have gotten the same decision?
Maybe not unanimous.
Do you think there's a little deference because she's a female and in some
Definitely
circles?
in Kagan's case.
Okay. All right.
I mean, you just look at the way she talks to men versus women, it's a completely different person.
I think you're right. So I'm just pointing that out. Little disappointed that the senator, as mayor, is not for just complete abolition of the minority business enterprise preferential treatment. There's been a problem, I believe, in the city of Jackson for some time. There's no secret. I've made it very clear that I believe it is the root cause of all the corruption, all the graft, all the problems, and that there's almost a syndicate that's in place in the city. However, I will say this. He did indicate he's open for some reforms, and the reason that the senator is not just hard concrete against it is because he wants to help minority businesses in the city. I think that's noble. My approach would be, let's figure out a way, maybe the private sector could help some of these minority businesses to improve. So his idea about, hey, look, you guys, he used a bricklayer. You're terrible with the back office. You all need the same stuff. Maybe we could sort of pool you together and you could rely on and leverage the resources of some entity to support all of you with these back office functions. I actually think that's a pretty good idea, but I'd like to see maybe the private sector.
Wouldn't it be like a guild?
Yeah, an association. Yeah, sure. Same deal. But perhaps the private sector and private individuals would be willing to maybe mentor some of these companies to help them improve. So I'm certainly not saying they should be discriminated against because, and I don't believe that. They should have equal footing. But it's also true that, look, we got a job to do on behalf of the taxpayers and the citizens of the city. We need the best value for the city. And that's a combination of the most qualified, who has the most relevant experience, the strongest relevant experience, who can point to references that will say these people do good work, who have all the necessary resources to accomplish the work, and, of course, done at a fair price. The combination of all that, that's what an RFP does. It scores across specific areas that are pertinent to the selection process. I just believe that ought to be done without any regard for all this other stuff, these characteristics.
Especially considering, by definition, it's contradictory. If the city is 70 to 80% African American, then they're no longer a minority business within the city limits.
That's been pointed out before. I actually think that those people would be better served. That's the idea. That's the goal, is to improve the quality of the services, and he made that point. Yeah, it's kind of hard for us to recruit business here when the water doesn't work. What do you say? The flush doesn't flush, and the streets got potholes in them, and the crime is rampant. He's right. All that's absolutely true. I just think the way to address that, let's just hire the best value partner to help us with these issues. Let's don't get all tied up on what their race is or what their ethnicity and nationality or even where they're located, honestly. And you know what? If these minority-owned businesses in the city can play a role and provide value, I'm okay with encouraging it, participation and subcontracting, but it should not be the determinant that it is now in awarding these contracts. I think as long as that continues, the city will continue to struggle, and we want to make the city better. Let's make Jackson great again. It was at one time, no doubt. I grew up there. I remember it distinctly. Coming right back, final segment.
Days with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
That would be Lucille, right, on the guitar. B.B. King.
Well, B.B. King on the guitar.
Oh,
Named
Lucille, that's what I meant. Oh, man. The couple of things before we got out of here today. I'll be off tomorrow, by the way. Headed up to Old Waverly to play in a golf tournament with my son, Nick. Looking forward to that, leaving after the show. Why do you think AI is such a good idea? I'm not sure where to start with that. I'll just say that in general, this is what we know from an economics perspective. The speed at which goods and services can flow through an economy dictates the amount of wealth that is created. And the faster stuff can move, goods and services, then the more wealth created. Because the way you create wealth is productivity. The more output per second of human labor, the wealthier we are. So, just in a broad sense, what AI does is it just speeds stuff up a lot. It's not that it can do anything that humans can't. It's emulating what humans do. It's that it's doing it at a much faster clip than a human can do it. That's the real value of AI. And it also is not as prone to error because machines are repetitive. They do the same thing over and over and over again. They don't know. If they're going to make an error, they're going to make it over and over again. But if they're going to get something right, they're going to get it right over and over again. Whereas we humans, we're right a lot, but sometimes we make errors just because every time we try to do something, it's subject to that. Whereas with a machine, they're repetitive instruments.
And until we get to artificial general intelligence levels of AI.
That's right.
And AI, it may be programmed to emulate human emotion, but it can't have a bad day where it's just got a chip on its shoulder and it's not going to do what anybody wants to do.
No doubt about it. I like to say these machines and all this technology, they don't quit, they don't get sick, they don't take vacation, they don't have bad days, in other words.
But in much the same way people pushed back against the train when we got perfectly good ships, we got wagons, and people pushed back against the car because, well, we got horses. And people push back against the computer because, well, we got an abacus.
Because
people are going to push back against AI because fear of the unknown is still a fear. But I would say to the people that, I know it's not a huge portion of the population, but it is a portion of the population that is just adamantly against AI out of the fear of change and possibly motivated by the fear of what they saw in the movies with Terminator. We don't have that level of artificial intelligence yet, and we don't have the power density for a Terminator to walk around. So just remember, Terminator was a work of fiction, not a documentary filmed in real time.
That's true. So just in a nutshell, any sort of technology that can speed things up. If you think about it, all this automation speeds things up. That's really what it does. Makes us more productive. It's just tools to get stuff done quicker. And that is the way you produce wealth. It's the only way, honestly. It's the only way. If you think about life today versus life 100 years ago, what wasn't available then? That's why we're all wealthier today. Now, some will say, well, there's certain classes of people really haven't risen, seen their...
No, that's complete bull, because the kings of the world that set into motion World War I would kill 1,000 men for air conditioning, refrigeration, and all of the world's information in their pocket.
No doubt
They
about
would have
it.
killed thousands of people just for access to that one thing for themselves, and everybody's got access to it.
100% right. Completely 100% right. I remember asking, why do you have to do this? And he was like, because we're in Jackson. This is on the C Spire text line. Jeff starts out. Back a handful of years ago, I had a spinal surgery at University of Mississippi Medical Center. A few days after I was released, I started leaking spinal fluid. I was the only one home, so I called 911. They sent an ambulance to my house, and then they transported me to the local hospital. And then after that, they sent me via ambulance to the UMC Medical Center. And when I made it to the emergency room, I remember a security guard patted me down. I thought it was funny. He said, "Hey, I have to do this because we're in Jackson." So there's no doubt crime, probably the number one problem in all of America's cities, such as Jackson, that are struggling. I still contend that the procurement policies play a big role in why these cities have just declined so substantially. When there was a vacuum forum, a certain group of people got in charge. They decided to enact all these policies, and it really became legalized. What am I trying to say? The repatriation, not repatriation, reparations. Really became legalized reparations, and that's a problem in my view. But we are out of here today. I'll be back with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.